And who's on the end of Sophia? All right, I think we fit.
画質ばっかいい。
All right. Welcome, Internet, IB World, to the 2025 TOK Talk series here at ETH Academy, Thornwood, New York. We've got a prestigious panel today. TOK student Moises over here, our head of school, Dr. Kuskowski, head of mathematics, Mr. Bavone, myself, Mr. Johnson, head of our learning and knowledge department, Colin, TOK superstar, TOK student, Yuki, and then Sophia, TOK student on the end. And our topic today is the fourth PT, which is the following. Do the ever-improving tools of an AOK always result in improved knowledge? And the nice thing about this PT is it's open to all AOKs. We're not forced to focus on any particular AOK, which is perfect. We have a math teacher. I'm biased towards mathematics. We'll probably talk a little math, but we can talk about anything. Arts, history, sciences, doesn't matter. To get us going, we have a couple definitions that we should pin down before we open conversation. And there's three in particular. First and foremost is tool, this ever so simple and basic term, tool. What do we mean by tool? I wanted to kind of give a historical background here. In the history of philosophy, there's one particular philosopher, Martin Heidegger, hailing from Germany, whose whole philosophy revolved around the idea of tool. He was obsessed with equipment and tools, and he thought tools kind of made the world, what it means to kind of exist in the world, has a lot to do with these tools that have specific purposes. And when we work with tools, as long as they're functioning properly, they kind of disappear into the background. You know, imagine your favorite tool. If it's a hammer or a saw, I don't know the last time I used a hammer or a saw. But you've got your favorite tool. If it's functioning properly, if it's working correctly, it kind of disappears into the background. And in contrast, Heidegger famously said, it's only when tools break down, when they dysfunction, when they malfunction, do we kind of see them. We remember them. We're like, oh my God, my tool's broken. Happens with, I don't know, our school Wi-Fi, maybe? Different types of tools break down, and that's where we kind of remember that we have these pieces of equipment that help us understand the world. Okay, so that's Heidegger's sense of tool, a piece of equipment that has these practical purposes that kind of makes us part of a world. But I'm curious, as a basic definition, and not only definition, let's try to define the scope of tool for our purposes today. How vast of a territory do we want tool to cover? Do we want to include abstract methods, for example, which are in some sense tools? Or do we want to lean more on the material side, thinking of our technologies and these types of devices? So up to you guys. Anyone have a first definition of tool?
Oh, could you give us an example of like an abstract method, like
Oh,
a tool?
an abstract method. So an abstract method might be, I'm thinking of even a problem-solving method of mathematics. It could be maybe induction, the method of induction in mathematics, where you try to predict further in a series based on this kind of fixed pattern. That's a tool in some sense of the word tool, but it's quite abstract. We don't necessarily have a concrete manifestation of the problem-solving method of induction.
A tool, abstract tool could be, I was just thinking psychology, right? So basically a tool is not necessarily a device, an auxiliary like a hammer or a saw, something, or a calculator for that matter. But I think, so in psychology there is a theory could be a tool, because a theory, so there's this psychologist Kazimir Dombrowski who developed the theory of overexcitability. And so So that theory could be applied to identify behavior in humans. And so while it's not tangible, like you can't take it in your hands, but this is something that it identifies patterns. So if you don't have that, you have to like go through this and figure out what's going on with the person, run a bunch of tests, or you can look at this theory and then match the behavior against existing criteria. And then it helps you define a certain behavior. So in this sense, it's being used as a tool to help. So I would think that would be something more abstract. But I also if I may make a suggestion for the sake of this discussion, I think maybe we should stick to something more concrete that are tangible, like
Okay.
devices. Yeah, like a hammer.
Or like a
so-
hammer. Yeah.
I feel like, I mean, as Dr. Kim mentioned, and I feel like that's kind of one of the like methodological like tool in my opinion. And like, for example, like as I take a math, like I learned about the like Euler's method like recently, and maybe, I mean, there's a differences like between abstract and non-abstract, like non-abstract.
Concrete, we might call it.
Concrete, yeah. And I feel like Euler's method is one of the, I mean, concrete method that I can apply to like some of the problems. So, I mean, like for example, math, like formulas, I think this is, considered as like concrete.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
method in my
Yeah.
opinion,
Yeah, and I like that you use that as an example. If I'm remembering correctly, let me ask the math teacher. Is Euler's method a method of approximation? Approximation. Okay. I like that you said this, Yuki, because this is going to come up next in our next definition question. What is a good tool? Because when we judge tools, definitely one thing that's going to come up is their accuracy and precision. So it's really interesting to me that you chose an approximation method, because approximation methods are all about getting closer and closer. Can we be more precise? Can we be more accurate? And that turns out to be one of the ways in which we judge tools, about how good they are. So that's a really cool example. Even though it's abstract in some sense, it has this concrete flavor to it for sure. Yeah.
But I think, as you mentioned, I mean, the method, I mean, the tools could be like, I feel like it doesn't always like universally accepted by everyone, and everyone has like own their like perspectives and you know, interceptions. So it's kind of hard to define what is a good, you know, tool method, but good tools and improving tools, I think.
Okay.
But for our discussion here, should we stick with physical tools, or should we?
I mean, we can accept both of them, yeah, like methodological and materialistic.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm hearing one vote for more material, one vote for more abstract. Let's hear more voices, perhaps. Other opinions on what a tool is for our conversation?
Tools, maybe a tool is maybe like a way to like prove knowledge, like apply the knowledge in different sectors, like for example a calculator. I think that you employ the knowledge to use the knowledge and through the tools like you apply them. So
Yeah.
I think for me it's like better with like material tools.
Okay.
I am more interested.
Okay. All right. 2 votes for that. Mr. Ramon and?
I think it's probably easier if we just stick with physical tools.
Okay.
It's just easier for the conversation.
Yeah. With that said, do we want to allow this halfway house of digital softwares too?
That is.
Yeah.
Yeah, my
Okay.
computer is,
Yeah.
I would consider a tool.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify how mechanical we're getting. Okay, so we're leaning more towards that side. Colin or
But
Sophia?
I think I agree on Yuki more because I think tools can't be limited to just materials, because I think the aim of a tool is to like facilitate the process of pursuing a certain knowledge. So like for instance, what Dr. K said, the theory of overexample, something like that. But I think that also facilitates the like the process of pursuing the knowledge in like psychology. So I think like just like taking away conceptual methods is like I don't think that's acceptable.
Yeah, I feel like I'm sitting in the middle of the spectrum. You've got materialists, abstractions. Sophia, any opinion on this matter?
I also agree about the
Okay, consistent with the spectrum, okay, yeah. Well, yeah. For the sake of keeping everyone's voice in the panel, we'll have maybe a wider conception of tool, but I think we're all more or less on the same page on what a tool roughly is. More importantly, let's move on to our second definition question. An improved tool, after all, this PT, as short as it is, uses improve, the verb, twice, okay? It's gotta be important. In particular, improving tools, and that makes us wonder, how do we judge a tool philosophically? What makes a good tool? Now, Martin Heidegger had a lot to say about this. What I was gonna give you guys, I have a short list here of criteria that we might judge a tool by. So just listen to my list, and then in reaction, maybe you can point out which ones should be prioritized, which one resonate with you when you think about judging how effective a tool is. But in my list, I have things such as efficiency, user friendliness, or people are fancy, they might call it like ergonomics, like how accessible, how user friendly a tool is. That's going to come up a lot in thinking about technology. Reliability is an important one for sure, but not to be confused with these last two that I already mentioned, accuracy and precision. And I do want to highlight, as we know, all good TOK revolves around distinctions. And a key distinction for us today with this PT, for anyone who chooses to write on this essay, is accuracy versus precision. I wonder if a TOK student on the panel could speak to that. Could someone maybe try to describe what the difference between accuracy versus precision might be? A tool being precise versus accurate?
I might be wrong, but
Go ahead, Tom.
I think being precise is the action before being accurate. So like, let's say I throw darts, and if I have to be precise in order for myself to be accurate, like to throw the darts. So I think in my opinion, I think accuracy falls under precise.
Okay, interesting. You see an order of operations here. Like if you're learning a skill like dart throwing or archery or something, I can see how that comes into play. Usually when the distinction is talked about, they're kind of on the same level. They're more or less independent, but accuracy has a lot to do with like the intended value. So like if we're measuring something or we're using a tool, and perhaps we already have some of the knowledge, and maybe we're being good scientists and we're trying to get some of the same data that we already know to be largely true. If our instruments or equipment or tools are well calibrated, then they would give accurate results, accurate to the intended value. Whereas precision has much more to do with like fine-grained detail of measurement. So you can have a really, really precise measurement, like in physics, for example, to 20, 30 decimal places. But the result, the numerical result, could be wildly inaccurate. It could not be kind of latching on to what that true measurement should be. And that could be because our tool is crappy, miscalibrated, or made by the wrong company or something like this. And vice versa is possible too. We can have a tool that's like pretty accurate, but it's not so precise. It can't be so fine-grained. So anyways, like those are definitely features, especially when we think about the sciences, natural sciences. We're gonna care about accuracy and precision. But I'm wondering, how do you guys judge tools? And you feel free to add to my list. Again, efficiency, user-friendliness, reliability, accuracy, precision. What makes a good tool?
Convenience, I think.
Oh, yeah. Is that related to user-friendliness, or is that
They're
different?
kind of like
Okay.
like similar like words, but like in my interpretation, like user friendliness, right?
Yeah.
It's like, maybe it's aimed to like, I mean, aim for the, consumer perspective. But like, what I mean to say, like, convenience in terms of like, I mean, that's something that I can apply to everyone, not just simply focus on like consumer perspective, you know?
Huh. Yeah, it is an interesting word, Yuki, because typically when we think of convenience, we think of capitalist society where, you know, we could pop down to 7-Eleven and buy our Snickers bar at any given moment. You can buy 100 Snickers bars if you want to. And yeah, it's interesting to think about the idea of convenience within a research community environment. But I think you're onto something. I think maybe it's related, it's a close cousin to user-friendliness or ergonomics, is it related to accessibility too?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Something like that? Okay, yeah, I can get, and is that one of the more important criteria for you when you judge how good a tool is?
Convenience?
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
towards the top of your
Yeah.
list, okay, all right. How do others judge? Yeah, Moises?
I think like the difficulty to use the tool, like maybe it might be very good tool, but it's very difficult to use it. So I think if the tool is like more easy to use for others, I think it's a better tool.
I think like, remember what you were saying, that the tool is efficient.
Hmm.
So like, it's more like, if using this tool, you would be more efficient than using something that's harder, like the same way you would pick up longer procedure.
Ah.
So like, you can achieve more purpose you're trying to use more quickly or like with better precision.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I find myself agreeing with Sophia, because I had efficiency at the top of my own lists. But it immediately made me wonder, why is that so important? Because after all, this came up in a previous panel this year. If we're a scientist, yeah, there's government money and we have finite lives, but ultimately, we're not really rushing to find the truth, ideally. Unfortunately, in the world we live in, we tend to rush into everything. But abstractly speaking, there's no rush to prove something in mathematics or to find a result in science. No one's rushing you, except your parents, maybe. Okay, so like, it made me wonder, Sophia's agreeing with me too, like, why do we want our tools to be efficient? If we don't, we're ultimately, let's pretend we're ultimately not very rushed to get our measurements and results. I'm just kind of wondering, is there another element of efficiency that's attractive in our tools besides just getting our knowledge more quickly?
For me, a good tool is just one that fulfills its purpose for which it was designed. Right, you build a tool to do something. If it does that well, it's a good tool.
Okay. So is that related to reliability that I mentioned?
Sure, it has to be reliable.
Oh.
Because if it's not reliable, it's not fulfilling its purpose.
If it doesn't work, it's not a tool.
If it doesn't work, it's not a tool.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's no point in having a car if there's no engine in it.
Hmm. Now, what Ms. Rabone is saying brings to mind a missing element in this PT. Is if we think about the full picture and zoom out a little bit, we've got our knowledge as our output, which we're after. We've got the tools that get us there. What the PT is missing is us, the users. And it's interesting, that really stood up to me when I was thinking about this, how we're thinking about improving our tools, improving our knowledge. Maybe what's really, really necessary ultimately is improving ourselves, the tool users. And so related to what Mr. Bramon is saying, I can see that reliability, kind of a tool's ability to fulfill its own purpose. But that seems deeply entangled with the user's ability to use a tool properly. So I think maybe we can just flag that for now. That might come up later when we think about us as the users of tools. But yeah, I really like that, purpose fulfillment, for sure.
Can I say?
Yeah, go ahead, Yuki.
Like, as you said, efficiency, right?
Yeah.
And it might, like, it's kind of maybe like perspective from like economical like term, but like in my opinion, maybe like cost performance, it's like, maybe I'm something kind of specific in my opinion, but like, the thing is like, for example, like, if you pay like, maybe like, so for iPhone, if you pay like $1,000, and if you cannot get the like benefit or like value from this $1,000 of iPhone, I don't think it's gonna worth, I mean, as a tool, in my opinion. But like, in my opinion, I bought this phone because I think it's worth to pay like $1,000, because they're gonna give me like a lot of value, like not just simply like, I mean, materialistic thing, you know, give me like some knowledge and like, it's kind of like abstract, like,
Okay.
abstract thing, not abstract, methodological thing, in my opinion,
Okay.
I think the efficiency, I see, well, yeah, obviously the speed of operation, it creates efficiency, but to your point that we don't rush the knowledge, the acquiring knowledge, but I think what that does, efficiency allows time for using a tool in one operation, allows time to process all the other operations. So let's say if you are strangely enough, I'll use math as an example,
Nice,
right?
yeah.
So in math, right, if you're working on the problem, on the conceptual problem, where the mechanical calculation is part of it. So, but your brain is preoccupied with the concept, right? So you can spend time calculating by hand or whichever way you want, which detracts you from thinking of a bigger problem. If you use calculator to do mechanical calculations, your brain capacity is involved at the core of the problem rather than being distracted by calculations that are pure mechanical. And so using the calculator, it aids you in getting closer to the core of the problem. So you get or I think if we use maybe not just a sort of a rough example of digging a trench. You can dig a trench with a shovel, or you can dig a trench with the excavator. And so the result is the same.
Like what's happening outside,
Exactly. The amount of time is very different. But it gets you, so basically digging a trench is only part of a bigger task. So efficiency in one operation provides you with ability to move to the next operation and the next and the next. So it shrinks one step. Maybe that's not the digging a trench, maybe that's the most important thing, but it has to be done. And again, the example we're having right now, we're working against the weather, so efficiency is critical. So the sooner we dig a trench, the sooner we get to putting the pavement before the snow comes.
I see. That makes me feel better about putting efficiency at the top of my list. So
So-
it's not just about rushing.
No, not at all. I think it's usually if you see efficiency or using a tool as a step in a complex process of solving a problem and using any of the areas of knowledge. So in science, whether it's natural or human. So you're on the way of discovery of something where you go through several steps, and it just creates efficiency in solving the problem, getting closer to the, and allows you time to focus on something that's more important versus that's just an auxiliary to a bigger problem.
Perfect transition too, because we should look at some examples from our different AOKs that Dr. K just mentioned. He also just mentioned the particular AOK of mathematics, and we have Mr. Bravone here, and that was the top of my list. So perhaps we can, for however brief we want, think about mathematics and the ever-improving tools that mathematics as an AOK has. And definitely what stands out to me when I was thinking about this is the infiltration, okay, that has negative connotations, but the kind of infiltration of computer software into the professional field of mathematics. And searching the internet for famous examples, one that I've already read about before, it's a really neat historical example, and it's easy to understand for anyone, even if you're not a math student. And it's this famous four-color theorem. And the whole idea is you have a map, you just think of the map of our world, really. And imagine you're a map maker and you need to color every country, so bordering countries have different colors. All right, there's a couple mathematical rules there I'm leaving out, okay, but let's forget about the details. Neighboring countries have to be different colors. And that makes sense, because if you're a map viewer, you want to be able to easily distinguish country from its neighbors. So this was the basic question. They're like, what's the minimum number of colors we need to color our world map? And it was like this lovely, simple, open question in mathematics for a while. And it's a really nice historical example for us, because as far as I can tell, this was one of the first cases where the mathematicians, they tried for a while, the smartest minds, and they were just like, hey, we've got the software now, let's give it to the computer, see if we can figure it out. And through brute force, basically, after, okay, these were slow computers back then, but after whatever, days and days, weeks and weeks, I don't know how long it took, it eventually had a result. And the computer was like, yeah, you only need 4. And the really neat thing is the mathematicians struggled to kind of understand the proof, what the computer produced, for a long while too. So there's this whole extra layer, which is kind of specific to mathematics, isn't it? Okay, there's almost like this backwards engineering that needs to happen. They're like, okay, we got this result from the computer now, but now we have to do this human work of digesting it and understanding it. So, okay, back to our PT, thinking about this example. Ever-improving tool, so we've got computer verification of a math question. Is that improving our knowledge? Especially in light of the last thing I just said, the fact that we need to kind of unpack whatever the software gives us to even understand it to begin with. So what do we think about this case study and the infiltration of computers into the math world? I bet Mr. Mavon has a thought.
Okay, I like how you used infiltration, and
Yeah.
Do the new technologies that we use improve our knowledge, or do they possibly decrease our knowledge in some aspects? You talked about calculators. Sure, calculators are fine. They help you get to the crux of a problem and get rid of the mundane, routine aspect of mathematics. But then do people not learn the mundane, necessary steps of mathematics? It's like, does technology help you to lose knowledge? Like if you have something like photo math, okay, I can rely on photo math for a lot of problems, like to solve a lot of textbook problems, but I don't learn how to do the textbook problems.
Yeah.
Does that help me to learn? Does that hurt me to learn if I'm relying on my computer, on my calculator to do everything for me? Am I more knowledgeable or less knowledgeable?
Interesting. This is what what you were saying, that I was thinking about this. It's both true, right? I think the tool, so the tool, so basically using the calculator to replace your, mental ability to calculate. I think one does not replace it. Doesn't mean that you now don't need to learn how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, all of that. You still need to know how to do it. You still need to understand conceptually, and you should be able to do it at any given time. So the tool set calculator comes handy to create efficiency in the process, not to replace the knowledge. So now we say, we just need to learn how to use the calculator, not how to do the addition, subtraction. I think we still need to learn the basics and then use the tool to, and this brings slightly different, but along the same lines. So the software, right? So we bring software that now we have to rely on software to not, calculator is fairly simple, it could be verified by a human, right? So if you introduce some complex software that does a lot of things for you, then now you have to trust the integrity of that software. Because what if it's flawed? What if it makes mistakes somewhere? What if the tool is not as good as we hoped it is?
Yeah.
Then what?
Yeah.
Then we're totally relying on this tool, and so our knowledge is flawed. Because we come up with the answer that may be wrong because there was a flaw in the software. And we don't have the ability to discover it. So now, how do we trust? So the reliability, I don't know, I think it was one of your criteria for the tools. So the reliability is really becomes critical because there is no way, again, using the calculator example, so we can double check well, it may take us 3 times as long to calculate something, but we can do that. Or the fancy calculators, whatever they call them, text instruments, whatever. Yeah, so that can build a function for you on the ground.
Right.
So we can do it by hand also. Calculator saves time, but then we can double check that. But if we go to a more complex level,
Yeah.
you can't really do that.
Yeah.
So that's the dilemma.
Absolutely, yeah. Other thoughts about mathematics here? Yeah.
Well, I think Mr. Ramon and Dr. K focus more on the users of the tool, but I think, like going back to the question, like just talking about the concept of an area of knowledge, I think it rather than because reliability is dependent on the user, but just for the knowledge itself, I don't think is that important because if the tool's purpose is to broaden the understanding of the knowledge, well, reliability wouldn't be that much, it wouldn't be that important if the user knows how to use the tool without knowing reliability. So for instance, so there are a lot of calculators, but for example, there's a really complex calculator that allows us to broaden our understanding of math, but then it wouldn't be user-friendly for normal people. But if it is as efficient for the users that already are proficient in that knowledge, I think instead of reliability, I think efficiency is more important.
Yeah, or Moises had a thought, and then Sophia, maybe? Go ahead,
I
Moises.
think this has to be with precise and accuracy. For example, I can write an equation on a paper, and maybe my result would be 0.2 decimal. And if I put it on the calculator, maybe it would be more precise. But what happens if the equation was wrong? I mean, it would be better because the tool itself didn't teach me how to do it. So I think it doesn't improve the knowledge, it just convert it more precise. Because at the end I need to learn how to do it. But the tool is it doesn't provide me that.
So again, I think similar to what Colin said, the user's input is really important. We can't just outsource it all into the tool. There's a lot going on with the user too. Sophia, what was your thought?
I was thinking that the tools are useful to getting to a result or to achieving whatever actions you're doing with the tool. But regarding the knowledge, I agree with what Dr. K was saying. Because yeah, there are really, for example, again with the calculator, there are really complex equations that sometimes you need to use in math. And when you're doing them, you can take your time to each of all of those big equations. So it's useful to have the calculator because you have quickly and you know what's right, no? But then at the same time, as I'm relying on the calculator to do the equation, I don't know how to do it. I just put the equation and get the result. I don't actually go through every step to get it done. So I think it's useful to achieve something, but it's not really efficient regarding gaining knowledge.
Any more thoughts about mathematics? I was thinking neighboring math is the natural sciences, of course, and thinking about them, of course, we see a lot of infiltration with computer software as well. But perhaps there's less controversy here. One thing that definitely stood out to me is thinking about simulations in the sciences. And these have been quite amazing in providing scientists with, in particular, observing things that we would never, ever be able to observe otherwise. So most dramatically, the example I'm thinking of here is cosmologists and astronomers, these guys that think about the universe. You know, like almost by definition, we can't observe the universe. It turns out we're inside it. So we come up with these amazing computer packages, simulation software to kind of simulate the creation of different cosmic structures, you know, all the most famous ones like black holes or the beginning of the universe or whatever they're thinking about. And again, like a lot of real results have come out of this in natural sciences. But we should think about the PT and what, in particular, what kind of dangers might lurk there. You know, imagine you're an astronomer or a cosmologist and you're watching the simulation on your computer screen, and you take it, you're learning something about. But you know, what dangers lurk there, you think, Yuki?
Like, I mean, use the example of the astronomy, right?
Hmm.
Like, I found a like good example from like a microscope.
Okay.
And a microscope, like, you know, it allows us to like observe like tiny like micro like organism
Yeah.
that we couldn't see. And I mean, as we could observe those kind of things, I found a program which is called like reductionism, which is like focusing on small part of the fundamental of idea,
Yeah.
rather than like, you know, like rather than like looking the whole thing, which is like, if you focus on like too many things, like for example, like just cell. Okay, if you just like if you just observe like cells through microscope, we can know like the structures and how does it like function or that kind of stuff, but we cannot actually see like how the whole body in our body in ourselves is work.
Yeah.
Like, so I feel like that kind of give us like negative side, which is like focusing on too much thing on like a small like part of thing, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really great point. And Yuki mentioned reductionism, and definitely is dangerous in biology, and it even affected physics as well, which seemed to be, you know, less of a problem in physics. But reductionism is really dangerous. That's really interesting how our tools can put us in positions that we might not even be aware that we're being reductionistic. When you describe it, that's really cool. Yeah, and that's on the smallest scales. I was thinking on the largest scales, maybe something similar could happen there too, where we see too much of the large picture and not enough detail or something. Yeah.
Could be over there,
Yeah. Yuki's saying something that reminds me of my example for human sciences too. So I might quickly move on to that, unless anyone had any thought about natural sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, tool usage.
I could go back to the idea that tools sometimes help us lose knowledge. I think certainly when we talk about nature and our ability to survive in nature and our ability to self-sufficiency, people today are probably far less self-sufficient than people 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago, you could probably take any or many random young people, send them out into the woods, and they'd survive, right? I mean, even you just go back.
Let's try that next week, guys.
Right.
Outdoor leadership.
Yeah. Right, you go back like even 200 years or so, and kids could do this. But now I can't imagine, right? Like you take some of our kids, hey, go out for the week, and I'll see you later. You come back, and you'd be out at the search party like within hours trying to find them, because they have no idea what to do. That the knowledge has just been lost because of all of the tools and the technology that we have. Whereas people 1,000 years ago, they had some understanding of the world that
Mm.
we no longer possess.
Yeah.
Or certainly the vast majority of people no longer possess.
Mhm.
I mean, even when it comes to like, oh, making clothes, well,
Yeah.
people know how to do that.
Yeah.
Like, how many people can you make your sweater now? Or can anyone in your family do this? Well, there are some, but
Yeah.
like so much of the knowledge of self-sufficiency, of being able to live in the natural world has been
Mm.
lost.
Yeah.
And even when it comes to like engineering and construction,
Mm.
you look at what people did millennia ago without the machinery that we have today, and they were able to do this. No one knows, like, oh, like, how did they do this? Okay, that knowledge is gone,
Yeah.
and it's gone in a large part because of the tools that we have created.
Yeah.
I don't disagree, but playing devil's advocate, I would say that, for example, making clothes, right? So everybody was relying on themselves 300 years ago to make their own clothes. Now, probably none of us can make clothes, but we all have clothes. So there is somebody has that knowledge that to make, that use machinery and whatever else. So what we do, we rely on others. So like there is a shoemaker somewhere who will make shoes that I can buy. So I don't need to learn how to make shoes, but I will learn how to do something else. So I think, so that's where, but I think again, returning to my now old example of using the calculator and ability to calculate without the calculator,
Yeah.
I think to some degree, we need to have some basic understanding. So for example, you were talking about maps. And so how many people today can read a map? Because it's not needed for many.
Yeah.
Because you can turn on your phone and it tells you everything. So you don't need, so many people who know how to use the phone to look at the map lost a concept of how.
And you can take this back even further. How many people can read the stars?
Yeah.
Because people traveled the oceans in the South
By the-
Pacific just by looking at the sky. They didn't even have a map.
Yeah.
I can't imagine too many people
Yeah.
alive can do that today. This knowledge has basically been lost.
I wouldn't go for a certain.
Yeah, you should not try to do this.
Moises?
Yeah, but I think it's not a knowledge that you require. Like, yeah, many people cannot read the stars, but as Dr. K said, you don't need it. Like for example, you need to learn other knowledge nowadays, like how to use a computer, because that's the knowledge that you will apply in the future. Like I think you need to learn the knowledge that is important for you and for the alpha generation. Like surviving in the woods is not required, and it won't be important for them in the future, hopefully.
Ideally, yeah. Until next year's school field trip.
It's so, I guess if we move to human sciences,
Yeah.
I was thinking history, literature, things like that. And that's, I think it's the sheer volume. Let's say if you're researching, well, okay, if you want to know part of history, because we live today, we need to look back to see what happened before to kind of have a perspective on it. So I think one way to go, we can go to the library and shuffle through hundreds of books and read it all. It'll take days, weeks, months to do that. Or we can use the computer which can just summarize us and say like, this is the top 10 by relevance. So this is the articles. So now I'm saving myself time. I don't need to go look through things. I now know, and I can go the next step to say, okay, give me 3-paragraph synopsis of each article. And I can read through a synopsis to say, okay, do I need to read this further or not? So I can very quickly narrow down something that I need. And so the efficiency of the process is really I mean, even in my lifetime, I remember that when I was in the university,
Yeah.
doing all this kind of work, you would physically go to the library, you will check out books,
Yeah.
like 8 of them,
Yeah.
and then you look through all of them to figure out which one you need, and then you pick 2 out of 8 and you read those
Yeah.
2.
Yeah.
But having looked at all 8 before, so
Yeah.
it takes a long
And then you have to
time.
make your own clothes too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a whole, it's a
So,
lot.
yeah, so
Lot
it's,
going.
it takes time, and so here, about how does it improve knowledge, so you gain knowledge, but not at the same speed.
Mm.
So it definitely improves that you can get
Yeah.
faster, and you earlier said, maybe there's no rush. Really, yeah, maybe there is, but there is, I mean, I guess it depends what you, it's not all the same.
Yeah.
In some places, there's no rush, but in some, you kind of want to get to the point quicker.
Mm.
So because you can spend weeks getting to the point, and then, or you can say, I mean, again, I'm comparing, so my mother, it took her 5 years to write the dissertation
Mm.
because of research and all of that and experiments.
Mm.
Well, it took me 3 years to write my dissertation, largely because I had access to a lot of tools that created efficiency in research, analyzing data and everything else.
Yeah.
So, and allowed me to move faster and then get to the point quicker.
Mhm.
Anyway.
Right. Other thoughts about human sciences, yeah, Yuki?
Like humans, or history is considered, no, history is either.
Or history, or history,
either.
yeah.
So I think, yeah, definitely like as Dr. K mentioned, definitely like this like vast like internet access us, like allow us to like access more information. But like also I feel like, I mean, in history area, I think it's a little bit confusing sometimes, because as you get more information, you will get more like perspective about like certain happening. For example, like World War II, like, you know, like, I mean, like American perspective and also as a Japanese perspective, they're like completely different. So, I mean, and also like, as you said, like internet is like kind of give us information like faster than it used to be, right? Because like, as you said, like your mother took like 5 years and you took like 3 years, right? 2 years of the gap. And, but in some case, I feel like that kind of 2 years, that kind of process maybe is essential to like understand the happening, you know, from like different perspective, and also like from, and also like improve the understanding of the, I mean, the case. So, I mean, it doesn't always like mean like, I mean, improving like tool is like result in like improved knowledge in my opinion.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, John.
I think Yuki touched the point on how, well, how tools, ever improving tools, not always like result in improved knowledge. And so, as Yuki said, if like the tools bring like, I don't know, say like an overdose of knowledge, so and that could cause ethical considerations like bias, like towards a certain historical event.
Yeah.
And I think that proves how tools cannot always be like good.
Yeah. We are, first of all, running short on time, but I do think that's a lovely kind of place to wrap up our conversation in, because I did want to loop back to the VT one last time and emphasize that there's kind of a leftover bit that we didn't really spend time defining, namely, what is improved knowledge? We thought about improved tools and good tools, but how do we improve knowledge? And in TOK, we don't really waste a lot of time defining knowledge, because we have kind of a set definition of what we mean by knowledge, but improve knowledge. And you guys spoke to this kind of overwhelming quantity of knowledge. That could be detrimental, ultimately, if we're overwhelmed by too much knowledge. the quality of knowledge is gonna be an aspect of how knowledge might be improved. The manner in which it's presented, how relevant it is. Dr. K talked about relevance. So there's all these different ways that knowledge itself can be improved too. So that's something for people, once again, who go on to write on this topic, something to definitely address. And I think in our age of internet information overload, this kind of excess of quantity is probably a really good example.
And this,
Yeah.
PT only deals with knowledge as opposed to wisdom.
Yeah, which you were speaking to with
Okay.
making our own sweaters and surviving the forest.
Well, that is also, but I mean, there's other aspects of wisdom and how to live. And
Right. So, unless anyone had any other final thoughts, I was gonna open it up to our huge audience. Any, way in the back, any questions? Questions from anyone out there? Spartan?
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so I know you left this toward the end, but I think exploring what's meant by improved knowledge is pretty important for this question.
Yeah.
I think within one particular area of knowledge, if you were to choose one, what would be a good example of a moment when knowledge has been improved? Like what's a good central case or a great example within a particular area of knowledge where you think there's been an improvement in knowledge? That's my question to anyone on the panel. Choose one area of knowledge, when was knowledge improved?
Well, I think definitely in natural sciences, as you just said, the microscope, I could like specific to natural sciences, like I think new discoveries within that area of knowledge like can be defined as an improved knowledge, because like the aim of that area of knowledge is to discover. And I think like as the tools allow us to discover more about nature, I think that's the closest definition to an improved knowledge in natural sciences.
I think I would just, again, it's not necessarily an answer, but rather another question to a question, because when we talked about improved knowledge, that's kind of what you alluded to earlier. So what do we mean by improved? Improved in volume? Do we have access to more knowledge? Improved in precision? Do we have knowledge that's more precise? That we now, let's say in mathematics, we're able to calculate something that we haven't been able before? I mean, so what constitutes improved is, I think it's definitely, again, if we look at human sciences, so yes, we have the various tools that provide analytics. That does it improve knowledge? Yeah, in a way it does, because it analyzes an insane amount of sources that no human can possibly do, and provides you with the aggregate of information. So that definitely improves our knowledge of a certain issue that we're looking at, per se, and it helps us determine the next steps. So that's sheer volume, right? But so I think the definition of improved, if I were to write on this question, I would start by defining for myself, for the sake of the paper, as you started, was the tool, what the tool means, and what's improved means. Not stating that it's not limited, but for the sake of the paper, that's what we stick with. I think that would be a much more effective paper if we say we use only material tools per se, or we look at computer software and that's it. Understanding that there's vast number of tools, but we're just looking at that. And when we talk about improved knowledge, we'll pick something. We'll pick the quality of knowledge, the volume, whatever else. And so then it'll be much better paper, I think.
Absolutely.
If I were reading it,
Yeah.
it would be easier to read.
Absolutely, yeah. Any other questions? Mr. Ryan?
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah.
So I'll just read this out. So, is there more knowledge gained or conveyed in the creation of the tool than in the use of the tool? For example, computer programs and calculators can be used to solve complex problems quickly. Is there greater knowledge shown in the actual programming of the tool? as AI advances, should education emphasize the programming of these tools as opposed to the use of them? And this is something I think about a lot, especially from like math education, you know, because it's like, okay, the tools are advancing, so should we be focusing more on like the underlying programming of the tool as opposed to just teaching the students how to use the tool? You know, like that's kind of something I think about a lot. So.
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
I want to, sorry panelists, I want to quickly interject too, because there's a big irony in programming in particular, actually, the programming world. If you're a professional coder, it turns out now, like no professional coder who makes a living programming software programs. They use GPT. It's just like, they'll laugh at you if you're actually literally programming, even though that's what you're trained to do and that's what you are as a profession. They all use AI now to do their coding for them, but they've got this new skill set because they do know how the AI software works at a certain level under the surface. Yeah, I really like that question. Like, 'cause after all, we have to create and invent the tools. I mean, is that knowledge somehow more important ultimately than other forms of knowledge? Yeah. What do panelists think?
Interestingly enough, going back to programming, I think okay, this is actually quite funny that ChatGPT does the programming right now, but that's true. So programmers learn how to program, right? So they program, so they write programs that help us solve certain things. Ironically, the programmers themselves probably have no knowledge of what their programs are being used for, because they create a tool, but then they don't necessarily know what it's used for, and whatever it's being used for, they may not have no knowledge about it. So interestingly, so to be a programmer, to create a tool, you don't necessarily have to be an expert in any of the areas of knowledge you're creating this tool for, which is I find it's an interesting paradigm, because you like, say if you're a mathematician, you can't really be a mathematician without understanding mathematics, because it's a prerequisite. But you can create, you don't have to be a mathematician to write a program that calculates certain things.
Yeah, that goes back to your point about trust too. How
Yeah,
much
you have to
trust
trust the tool,
the non-specialist makes it. Yeah.
But yeah, so there's so many ways we can go with that.
Yeah.
It's,
Any thoughts there?
Something I think about a lot.
Yeah, that's a great question. Saki, Karu, any questions?
I mean, I don't really have a question. It's like, as a reflection, I thought that, as Mr. J mentioned, like in this PT, there's no like subject, there's like humans, like, you know, it's just like how the ever improving tools result in improved knowledge. So what got me really curious was like, oh, it's like, I feel like ever improving tools themselves like do not really directly related to the improved knowledge, but rather like it's like how humans, like how we use. So that's kind of how we use gonna decide whether it's gonna be an improved knowledge or, as Mr. Willow mentioned, or like diminishes knowledge. So
I like that, Saki, too, and I want to interject again too, because this might bring us full circle, the secret return of abstract tools. It seems like the users was missing this PT. Ultimately, we use our own abstract tools in order to use the concrete tools effectively. And so like, I don't think we can ever kind of get rid of these abstract tools, which ultimately, you know, all of our triangle here between tools, knowledge, and user, if we talked for another 6 hours, then we might agree that the user is the most important element. You know, the tool and the knowledge is not going to matter at all unless we become better users. So yeah, I think to be a good user, I don't have a magic formula right now, but I definitely know you need to have good abstract tools, those mental tools, thinking tools, whatever we want to call them. Yeah. Sorry, I just stole from panelists again.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Karu. Yeah.
Mr. Bobo, like, you say like children like 1,000 years ago, they can like survive in the like forest or something. Like children like 1,000 years ago. Like
They had abilities and knowledge
yeah,
that
is it because
young
of like
people today don't have.
because they didn't have tools, so like they have like their own knowledge, like I mean like because they don't have like tool, like they have the like ability to survive in the forest. But like now like we have like tools, so like we don't have that knowledge. Like I mean, we don't have the knowledge that like people have when they don't have knowledge, they don't have tools. So like, do you think like which knowledge is more valuable,
Which knowledge is more,
important,
I'm not putting any value on this, I'm just saying that the knowledge has been lost. I mean, there may be some value in understanding what plants will help you feel better if you eat them. But you know, most people don't have that knowledge anymore, whereas years ago, people did have that knowledge.
That's a perfect example of this. Like, let me rephrase what you might be saying, Calvin. I think you're onto something really cool here. Like this outsourcing. I think you're kind of reacting to what Mr. Ravone said. In many ways, we might not have lost someone's knowledge per se. We've only kind of outsourced it into our technologies. And you know, there's this plant app, which is really cool. My wife uses it all the time. So you can turn the forest. If you're someone like myself and you have no knowledge, like zero, of what a plant is or compared to other plants, you literally hold up your phone camera with the app and you focus on it, and it tells you everything, including how poisonous, how healthy it is. Full survival value in that outsourced piece of technology. And so maybe just as the last thing to say, in contemporary philosophy, there is this notion of the extended mind, which kind of thinks about not us users and our technology as separate ingredients of the world, but how we're kind of like enhancing ourselves as humans by taking on these technologies and making them part of us in some real sense. And so, yeah, when my wife is in the forest with her plant app, it's almost like that phone is part of her, even though she doesn't have all the knowledge in her head. She knows how to use that app much better than I do. And yeah, so there's something really cool there that we might not have lost a lot of this old knowledge, but kind of put it into our tools.
And I think what Carol was saying is
Yeah.
exactly what made me think also, that directly relates to our question here.
Yeah.
Is that, okay, so back 1,000 years ago, people had tools as well. There were different tools.
Yeah.
There were the tools that would help you, skin the animal, saw the skin, and make a clothes, right?
Yeah.
So now we evolved. The tools improved dramatically. So we don't need to, so they're not as primitive anymore. So ever improving tools improved. So what happened with the knowledge? Did the knowledge improve? At some stage it did, but at some stage I agree with Mr. Ballon. Knowledge, general knowledge, was lost for general population. Let's say 1,000 years ago, every human knew how to hunt, how to make food out of what they hunt, and how to make clothes out of whatever they can do. So now, a small group of people will still know that, because they're just using different improved tools to do all of that.
Yeah.
So I think that, and that's the dilemma. So does it improve knowledge? On one hand it does. Does it, on the other hand, it doesn't, because it improves knowledge in some, but others lose it because they rely on the machine or somebody else to do it for you.
Yeah.
And anyway,
Yeah.
that's we did the full circle.
We did full circle. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, Dr. K. Noises. Following you. Thank
This
you.
is scheduled.
Sorry if I see you. Yeah. Thank you, guys. We can close this.
I was
How many of those mugs do you